just like that, it's Monday. It's Monday again. Who would have thought? Monday. How could it be? Do you have a good weekend? Hello, I'm Russ Kane. This is Men's Radio Station. And of course, this is The Daily Show. I'm a little discombobulated today. And I'll tell you why I'm discombobulated, ladies and gentlemen. Simply because I'm using a brand new laptop. I'm very excited. It was my birthday present. So I'm having to get to grips with it, you see. So if I completely F up, you'll know what's happened. Let's go international, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go international. Flash, Barry J. Allen has arrived. Always good to see him. Now, you know him, you love him. He is undisputed the king of comedy, the king of thoughtfulness, the king of mindfulness. He's also Mr. Neil Long.
Me?
Oh, God.
You signed the king of all those things. You haven't hung around with me for a very long time.
Yes,
hello,
true.
good afternoon. Welcome to Men's Radio. Yes, I did do a comedy gig last night with our friends at the Whole Lot of Comedy Club. And it was an absolute belter. I did my Hot 10 and it was a fantastic night. Rob Hitchmer was headlining.
Is that a good thing? I don't know who that is.
Rob Hitchmer, no, he's very good. Very funny.
He good?
Very funny comedian.
Oh, right. We've got to dash around the world now very quickly. We go first of all to Manhattan and say good morning to Elizabeth Green. Then from there we go to Houston in Texas, who say good morning. I've got a cold. Oh no! Let's hope it doesn't go to your chest.
You should suck on a fisherman's friend.
Emma Webb, who's going through all sorts of God knows what. Emma Webb, hello, Ems. Hope you're well.
Hello, Emma.
The Cypriot Brigade have arrived. Hello, Sen Munro.
Sen Munro, how you doing?
Everybody. That's everybody. Right. Got a full show today. No time for us to witter on about the magnificence of New Malden.
I could talk about that for at least 15 seconds.
Well, you have to fill the rest with like a potted history of the London Underground service. Special guest. He's been on before. We wanted him back.
Yes, we did.
He's a serious dude. He is one of the top forensic psychiatrists in the United Kingdom. He's also pretty funky. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Soham Das.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. You guys always give me such a nice intro.
Well, I'm glad you're back because you were so fascinating last time, dude.
Yeah, that's nice Dr. Dude to you. You don't just call that dude. He's got. I'm going to show you in a minute how many blooming letters he's got after his name, so you could just be quiet. Look, right? That's who we're talking about, dude. Oh yeah. All right. What is an MB?
MCCHB, MRC, Psych, MSc, BSc doesn't roll off the tongue as easily as dude.
But I'll tell you what.
Impressive.
I bet he's not a member of the Blockbusters Video Club.
No,
I was once. R.I.P.
Oh, bugger.
Yeah.
That's completely ruined my whole joie de vivre. Right. Welcome back.
Quite a CV.
Well, it is a CV as well. Now, do you think I don't even know where to start because whatever we do, so I'm not going to touch the sides of some of these issues. Years ago, when the pandemic started, and I will bang on about it just for a sec, what people hadn't realized is that the mental health aspects of it were going to be as devastating and longer reaching than the physical aspects. Have you noticed this in your work? And I know your work's very specific. I understand that completely.
Good question, Russ. So I would say that. Well, so I know what's been going on in the background. So in the background, it's all fairly like obvious stuff. There's been more isolation. People have been more withdrawn, less human contact during lockdown, and possibly less obviously, I think there's been more strain on mental health services, right? Because so much face-to-face contact stopped and teams broke down, lots of appointments that were due were delayed. So not just checkups for things like antidepressants, but people who are, seriously unwell, who might need to go into psychiatric hospital. That was all delayed as well. Didn't get the medication, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all happening in the background. As to whether I noticed it in my clinical practice, I have to say no, to be honest with you. The reason being is because I deal mainly with offenders, and the landscape of offending changed quite oddly during lockdown. So there was some offences that were more common, like domestic violence, and some that were far less common, like murder and
so you're saying, sorry, son, you're saying that during let's just call it the lockdown pandemic, or pandemic, give it a broad term, that the murder rate went down a bit.
Yeah, it did go down a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah,
Maybe
domestic
they just couldn't
violence
get out and
itself.
about. I mean, I'm not
Domestic
being
violence
facetious.
itself,
Maybe they
and
just couldn't get out and about to do it.
yeah, I suppose it depends on what kind of murder. I mean, murder is very rare anyway, but it depends on like the cause or the trigger for that murder. So if it's like things like domestic violence and violence within the home definitely increased, but your kind of gang violence, for example, decreased. Your kind of average person that gets into a fight into a pub and then it goes too far, that kind of violence
there was so
decreased.
much less crime reported. It was absolutely lovely. That was one of the good things about lockdown. That and the beautiful clear sky.
That is
Yeah.
true.
How did you two find your lockdown experiences?
After you, Russ?
No, after you, Neil Long of New Morland.
Well, I was going through a difficult time because my mum was dying. Basically, she was dying of dementia. But had it not been for that, it was I was still, because we were still allowed to broadcast. I work on another radio station doing their breakfast show.
What?
We were still allowed
Kidding.
to broadcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The other radio station. But
Yeah,
sorry.
No, it's fine. It's
I'm
fine.
a bit of a
Throw it
tart,
in my
Russ.
face. Throw it in my face. It's fine.
I know I'm a bit of a tart, but it was in an odd way. It was kind of a privilege to broadcast through lockdown because it's a local radio station, and the ethos of there became almost a lot more like here, where people can really tune in and feel part of something and to connect.
Shame it wasn't the BBC.
It stepped into, I think, a much sort of higher version of what it could be. So that was interesting. Plus, I was broadcasting virtual parties on my DJ decks. And what I found actually from the mental health point of view, not only was it having a laugh, an excuse to have a bit of a party every night, but on a more serious note, people just needed to connect. They needed to feel that they weren't alone. They needed to feel that they weren't completely isolated. And that was one particularly fun vehicle, one way of doing it, which I did. So had it not been for what I was going through with my mum and all the mental stress associated with that, it wasn't that bad for me. Long answer to a short question.
Okay, that's good to
But
hear.
I can equally understand how it would have been hideous.
We can ask your question to Chrissy Richards, who's listening in the south of Spain, who's gone through a horrible time recently. I'm not going to regurgitate it because she's trying to heal. But Chrissy, we send our love, all the team at Games Radio and the Daily Show, Neil and myself, all the gang. It didn't really bother me, she says, apart from not going to the UK to see my family and my friends. Well, absolutely so. The answer was for the radio, it was boom time because, as everything Neil has just said, people needed that sense of belonging somewhere.
Yeah,
and we were blessed to be able to offer that service. That was our dream when Howard and I set this up. Socially, it drove me around the bend. Not being able to just go out for a cup of coffee drove me nuts. I started to climb the walls. And the other thing was, of course, everyone normally when I walk my dog is at work. But no, they all decided they were going to be joggers. And they go, as they go past you. And I eventually carried this whacking great stick, which I held horizontally. And I thought, I'm going to go for your freaking knees if you come near me during this nonsense. If I've got to hibernate like an idiot, stay away from me. And that was it. And I reversed it. So where I was, which is normally incredibly quiet, so quiet, it was full of freaking joggers the whole time. So I went into Soho. I went into town. It was deserted. I had the whole of Soho. You could just walk anywhere. You could walk up Regent Street. It was marvelous, to be honest with you. A little dystopian. Yeah. Do you think, in your professional opinion, that's why I always ask, is this a permanent shift? Is this like a tectonic shift in the way that we live now?
What, in terms of like remote working, et cetera, et cetera? Is that what you mean?
Remote working and not going to so many places. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there has been a change. Obviously, it's not as big a change as what was happening during lockdown, but I think a few things have happened. So I think bosses have started to believe that we're not all going to go crazy and just drink all day at home like they might have assumed, so that we can actually be productive if we want, if we're well motivated in the right role. So I think there's going to be a lot more remote kind of work from home. Even though what I do is quite niche, I have to say it's kind of changed the landscape of what I do, in that I do a lot more Zoom remote interviews, and I have to say it's a blessing because I do a lot of assessments in prison, and it's an absolute ache in the pain in the backside to wait around in prisons, like to actually get there in the first place, never find parking, and then the security process of going into prisons takes ages. And
you can do all that on Zoom now.
Yeah, you can do all of it on Zoom. And the other thing about going into a prison is you're not allowed to take anything with you. You're not allowed to take your phones. You're not allowed to take like a cup of coffee or a book because it could be used to sneak in contraband, right? So you're literally sitting in a room for like an hour staring at a wall. But yeah, so it's made my life easier.
How do you? I'm so sorry. I don't want to. Please don't answer anything if it's confidential. But when you go in to a prison to assess someone, and you can't take, can you take a tape record? I mean, how are you?
You can take. I should say you can take one A4 like book and a pen, and that's it. And even then, in the Category A prisons, they kind of look through it all and check the wiring.
Like a notebook you pick up in Tesco's or Waterstones or something like that, right?
I've even heard that I don't think I've experienced this myself, but some prisons don't let you take in a spiral notebook because there's, that metal thing around the edge. It can actually be taken out and used as a weapon.
Oh, yeah, of course.
As a shiv.
Is it? I'm going to ask this question. You must have asked it loads, but people are going to be thinking, is it intimidating going into a prison?
I'd have to say no. It was the first couple of times because it just is bizarre, like going into the big gates, going through security, having your your thumbprint and your scan all done. So just that process itself is.
Sorry, scan. What do you? Whoa.
So in Category A prisons, especially, they have like a copy of your thumbprint so that they can identify you. So you have to scan your thumbprint at several gates. So it's not just once. You do it like at 3 or 4 different stages.
Wow.
I think it's because people, obviously prisoners do try and sneak out and do try and disguise themselves. So
I mean, like in the movies, I guess.
Yeah, I guess
I'm serious. I guess they swap. You're stuck there, and they're out consulting. I don't know.
But I would say that apart from that, it's not actually that scary being in a prison because the 2 reasons. Firstly, because generally they're on their best behavior when they see me, right? Because they know that I'm writing a report that the judge is going to see. So there might be horrible, nasty pieces of work. They might be antisocial. They might not even like me, but they know for that hour that they're sitting with me, it's in their interests to, behave themselves.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be, the exception to that, I would say, is if somebody's really mentally unwell. So if they're so psychotic, for example, they literally can't contain their behavior. And the other reason it's not that intimidating is that I go into the visits area where the solicitors see their clients rather than the actual wing of the prison where the prisoners have more control.
I got some questions coming in from America in a sec, but I want to sneak in one of my own. Do you feel you're able to? I don't know how to put this. Be completely objective. If I was sitting there and I know someone's done some awful act, how do you? I know it's because you're a professional. I get that, but underneath it all, behind all the letters, we're all human beings. And if I was sitting across, I'd feel terrified. I think you're very brave. I would be scared. You know what was. And my dry cleaning bill would be through the roof. Secondly. I'd be thinking, you're as guilty as hell. I don't want you. How do you keep the private from the? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Russ. I do definitely see prisoners or offenders that have committed some pretty horrific offences. So I see occasionally people that offend against children, people that kill random strangers, usually because they're mentally unwell. So the answer to your question is I'm very clear in my head what my role is. So there is an entire criminal justice system that I have to trust works, that decides whether somebody's guilty or not and what their punishment should be. My role should definitely be separate from that. So I should not be considering whether I think they're guilty or not. I should only be thinking about whether they've got a mental illness and whether that reduces their criminal culpability. So I'm just really clear in my head, and I will know what they've done before I see them because I get sent.
Right. So you've been sent all the background information.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like
so I have
to help me understand this process of deciding, because I've wrestled with this question for years, the kind of mad or bad question. And is it the more mentally ill they are, the less culpable they are? And the corollary of that is, do people who are mentally ill deserve punishment? And is prison literally the best we can do?
Oh, huge question.
That is a huge question. Also, I love the word of the use, corollary there.
Corollary.
Corollary.
I can never say it.
I can't say
corollary.
it.
I don't know how I said it. I can't normally say it. Corollary.
Are you sure you've got all those letters? Or they would just.
That's a Scrabble. That's a massive Scrabble.
Yeah, you want to try me at Scrabble? Bring it on.
He dipped in the Scrabble bag. He's like, I've got an M, I've got a B. Oh, great. There's a C there. I need some vowels. It's fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to answer your question. It is. Obviously, it's a big question to answer. If I was going to simplify it down into like a bite-sized chunk, then I would put it like this: there's a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have people that have pure psychiatric illnesses like schizophrenia. So that's a very common illness that I see in my patient group. And they are not responsible for their actions because they're hearing voices or they have these bizarre paranoid ideas that make them act violently because they literally think that they're in danger, right? That's one end of the spectrum. Okay. Other end of the spectrum, you have personality disorders. So that isn't like a step outside of normality. That is actually you. So everyone has personality traits. Obviously, people that I see during criminal trials, a lot of them have antisocial personality disorder. So they're impulsive, they're aggressive, they lack empathy, they don't care about the rights of other people. So those people, I would broadly say, yeah, absolutely. So narcissists would fit into that category. There's a slight difference in narcissist and antisocial, but that's a different conversation.
No.
Go on, Neil.
Sorry, yeah. So I was going to say that
after you.
On that end of the spectrum, I would say that they are in control of their actions. They know what they're doing, should be responsible, should go to prison if it's a serious offence. There is psychiatric treatment in prison, and I've worked as a psychiatrist in prison, but it's quite a poor standard, huge waiting list, not enough resources. So for the people on the first end of the spectrum that have full mental illnesses, they need to go to secure units, which I've also worked in because they're too unwell to be in a prison environment and they need to be rehabilitated and made safe.
And do people respond well to the treatment? And how quickly do they respond?
So typically in medium secure units, which is where I've done most of my work and most of my training, your average length of stay would be, I would say, about 2 to 4 years. Okay. So that's not just the medication to get rid of the symptoms, it's also the therapy to make them understand what were the factors that made them offend at that time. Was it just their schizophrenia? Was it drug and alcohol use? Was it antisocial peers? Was it poverty? So, really trying and understand what they did and take away the risk factors. So that's in a medium secure unit. You go to talk about high secure units like Broadmoor, it's much, much longer. So they're far more dangerous and they usually have much more.
I just want to throw this in quickly because I did read somewhere, and tell me if this is wrong, the schizophrenic. So it's a terrifying word, isn't it? But they tend to be more of a danger generally to themselves than other people before people have nightmares. Is that true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So even though the patient group that I see, they tend to be quite dangerous, generally speaking, somebody with any kind of severe mental illness like schizophrenia is far more likely to hurt themselves or be a victim of crime than to commit offences. It's just the ones that I see are the ones that have committed.
Yes, of course. Yes,
and just because I suppose I've seen so many films and TV movies, etc. When you're there, what protection do you have? Are they handcuffed? Are they restrained? Are there guards in the room? What's the story?
So it kind of depends on the environment. If I go to like a magistrate's court, right? So there'll be almost no protection. So I'll be sitting there in a cell with them. If the prison officers know that they're agitated, or if they're in for something like murder, for example, then I get put in a special cell where there's a glass partition. But there's only like one of those out of like 8 cells, so they're highly sought after. So it's only used like if you need it. So I suppose another way of saying that is they won't let me use that unless there's a good reason, because there's other prisoners that will use that.
I'm like, wow, okay.
In the prisons themselves, there isn't. There's guards around, but they certainly don't sit in there with the room with you because there's just not enough of them. There's like maybe 2 guards.
I understand staffing level, etc., etc. But I'm just thinking, because I've got to know you a bit, but for anybody, even though I didn't know you, what is your level of protection? You seem terribly casual about it. I'm nervous on a bus.
This is for someone that deals with people like chronic dangerous offenders. You do seem remarkably chilled.
It's like they may have killed someone, but I'm sitting there and there's probably not a guard, and I'm thinking you will get me within half a mile of. I mean, you wouldn't. I couldn't do it. I'd be terrified.
I mean, I have been punched in the face once at work, and I've been threatened. I'd say probably. I've been sort of shouted at and sworn at over 50 times. And I've been actually threatened maybe a dozen times. So it does happen. But then I've worked in this area for 15 years. So it's actually not that common when you think about it statistically. It's less than...
Right, let's get to Aza's question coming in from the USA. Dr. Des, do you feel that remote consults and therapy have had any disadvantages in your assessments? I read it out, by the way, in case you think, we're all thick, is because on Deluxe Radio, they are listening to our stream. They can't see any of this, so they can't see the messages coming up.
Yeah, good question. So I would say if somebody's really mentally unwell, so that end of the spectrum we're talking about, schizophrenia, and they're paranoid as opposed to agitated, that it's quite hard to make that assessment because you're not sitting in the room with them and you can't see the kind of subtle facial features, or you can't see subtle things like them shaking under the table. But that's only really in that circumstance. Most people with other symptoms, like severe depression, for example, it's not that different to, you know, if you're good enough at what you do, you can get the signs from looking at them over Zoom as you can from sitting in the room. So I think there are disadvantages in specific kind of circumstances, but not generally. And in terms of therapy, I suppose somebody who's really good at communicating, I think should have the skills to make their patient feel comfortable over Zoom. You know, there will be exceptions, but generally speaking, I think it's possible.
What kind of therapies are offered?
So I don't do the therapies myself. The psychologists do it. But to answer your question, it depends. So it's tailored for the individual. So if they've got drug and alcohol issues, which is huge, like more than half of the defendants that I see who've committed serious offences have that. You know, it can't be understated. In fact, I see that more often than I see mental health issues.
Is it because, sorry, just to delve into that, is it because they're committing crime because they need the money for drugs, or is it because they're on drugs that they're committing the crime?
So it's a bit of everything. Some do acquisitive offences. I can't say that, just like corollary. So that means acquisitive, yeah. So that means they do things like robberies and burglaries. They go out to get money for drugs. So that would probably cover probably about half of the patients that I see with drug and alcohol issues. Some only commit violence when they're on certain drugs. So some people, for example, when they take cocaine, who already have antisocial tendencies, who might be kind of, you know, quite criminogenic or violent, that will increase when they're disinhibited with alcohol and cocaine. So they commit more violence when on those things. And then as well as that, there's the more subtle kind of connections. So people who grow up in poverty or grow up in communities where there's a lot of drug and alcohol use will have less job opportunities, will probably be more indoctrinated into the criminal underworld. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're taking drugs, but they grow up in an environment where there is more crime and drugs. So it's all kind of layered and connected.
It's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because obviously these people, there's victims on both sides of it, isn't there? And that must be a really, really difficult thing to balance justice and compassion, I would have thought.
I think it's an uncomfortable truth that almost everyone that I see is a victim in some way or another. So, you know, the person sitting in front of me now might be a horrible, antisocial, nasty piece of work thug, but at one point he was probably a victim of physical or, you know, sexual abuse. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
Can I ask a very difficult question? And don't feel at all obliged. If somebody is can't be fixed, I'm putting it in complete layman's terms. If somebody really can't be fixed and they are seriously dangerous, a danger to the public, what is the point?
So I think that there are definitely people that would fit into that category. So psychopaths would be like an exact example of that. Psychopaths, in theory, well, they kind of split forensic psychiatrists. Some people think that they can't actually be rehabilitated. And there are people who you can't change their mental health baseline. So they don't have something like schizophrenia. So you can't medicate them. You can put them through therapy and it just doesn't work. So I would say, what is the point? I agree with you. I don't think resources are limited. So after you've tried therapy and it doesn't work, I think you have to accept defeat and not use those resources. And I think the safest thing you can do is observe those people. So have them on probation, have them come observed by the police. I don't know if you guys have heard about this.
Whoa, are you saying they're... Whoa. You're saying
so they're not in an institution?
Released?
Well, if they've not got anything, if they've committed crimes and they've gone past their parole date or their tariff date. So if they've committed some level of violence or a crime and they're no longer can be imprisoned legally, then you have to release them. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
You can't. I don't think you can justify keeping them in a mental health as a institution as opposed to a prison because it's a waste of resources. You're not actively sort of treating them. So I think it's inhumane to keep them in, but it makes more sense that they're observed out in society than keep them indefinitely kind of locked up where other people need those levels of treatment.
a tricky, complicated question, although it's framed in a very simplistic way. Coming in from New York now. Boy, it's interesting where the show is skewed to now. Elizabeth Green says this: is it so clearly defined? If you murder someone, you must be mentally ill? Question mark.
Absolutely not. So I suppose the answer to that would be it depends how you define mental illness. If you define mental illness as doing something extreme or something ununderstandable, then you could say that murdering somebody in some circumstances is ununderstandable. In other circumstances, like, you know, if they've in the battered woman syndrome, or, you know,
In
some
what?
sort
I'm
of
so sorry. In the
battered woman syndrome.
right.
So when
I
somebody's
didn't
been
hear
like
you. Beg your pardon.
the victim of domestic
Yes,
abuse,
yes,
or
yes.
you know, say like a gangland situation. So I suppose that what I'm trying to say is there are some murders that are understandable and ununderstandable. The ones that are ununderstandable, I think, by the public, are thought to be committed by people who are mentally ill.
Hmm.
But I would argue that that's not mental illness. So mental illness, from a psychiatrist's point of view, is somebody who has like a diagnosable illness that has specific symptoms that can be treated, like hearing voices, like hallucinations, like paranoid delusions. And then probably more importantly than that is the legal criteria of when somebody's mentally ill. So you would have heard, I'm sure, of the phrase of the defense, not guilty by reason of insanity, right?
Yep.
So the definition, if I was going to sort of simplify it and boil it down, the legal definition is if they didn't know what they were doing, or they didn't know that it was legally wrong. So, for example, if you have somebody, and I've seen cases like this, who have these delusions, you know, a mother who's got a delusion that their child is marked with, you know, like some sort of demonic curse, and she has to end their life to stop them going into hell. That is the kind of presentation that I would see. Obviously, what they do is horrific, and the consequences are you know, really extreme, but I would argue that they're not criminally responsible. So they need long-term treatment in a psychiatric facility rather than imprisonment.
Could they fake it?
It is possible to fake mental illness, but it's really difficult. So to use that specific example, I would say it's really hard to fake it for the following reasons, right? First of all, because we don't just take their presentation at face value. We're a bit more clever and sneaky than that. So we look at all the evidence. We look at their psychiatric notes, speak to their GPs, and it is very, very unusual for like that kind of illness to come out of the blue. It usually grumbles on slowly and gets worse over months or years. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we look at how we don't just look at how they are for the hour we see them. We ask for objective evidence. So if they're on remand, I will ask the prison officers about how they've been. If they're already on remand in a psychiatric institute, they're observed 24 hours a day by nurses. And finally, I'd say that people who try and fake it, they have their own agenda and they force it too much. So if I genuinely meet somebody who's paranoid psychotic, they're really sort of reserved and closed and quite defensive. So it's quite hard to get into their psyche. Whereas somebody who's trying to fake it will tell me within minutes of meeting me that they're hearing voices, that they're paranoid. So it's actually really easy to spot.
That's so interesting. This coming in from New York State, not Manhattan, but the actual state. Would you like to read this, Neil?
Sure. During a part of my doctoral residency, says Asa Don Brown, I had a psychiatrist as my primary supervisor. I found that our training was complementary, but definitely from very different approaches.
And do we know what her job and role was?
His.
Oh, his. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Asa Don Brown. He's the bloke on the left in the Stetson, looking groovy. I don't know. Asa, you're going to have to jump in and help. Here's an interesting point. This is coming in from southern Spain. Go figure. Which is this. It says, Chrissy Richards says, can you sleep at night? No. I think she's being serious.
Well, no, this was actually.
Can you
this
sleep
is what
at
I
night?
was How do you
have nightmares?
Yeah. How do you detach from all this? How do you look at all this horrible stuff and still retain some level of personal sanity? And what do you do to nurture your mental health?
Well, I never said that I had a level of personal sanity. No, I'm just kidding.
I kind of assumed it.
I think that I've always had an ability to emotionally detach. I think that's naturally been part of my characteristics. So it would be easy for me to say that having seen all these horrific cases over the years has desensitized to me. But honestly, I don't think that's the truth. I think I've always been a bit like that. I've always just been not easily freaked out or not easily scared, and had a kind of a low fear response. It's just part of my sort of natural makeup, and I happen to have found a profession where that's really helpful. So that's one thing. Another thing is a bit going back to what we were saying before. I'm sort of clear in my mind of what my role is. So I trust that people that do bad things will get their legal comeuppance at some point. I know that doesn't always happen. There are miscarriages of justice, but I have like perhaps a naive sort of faith in the system. And so I try not to overthink what my role is. I suppose the other thing is that I keep really busy. So, as Russ, as you know, I'm trying to break into the media. So I'm always doing other things, from my YouTube channel, written a book to, so I'm too busy to really ruminate over cases. And even my throughput of...
you say that, and I think it's amazing, this ability to detach, because if you're even a little bit like blotting paper or a sponge, it's going to adhere to you. You're going to, be driving home or leaving the prison or stop the Zoom call, and you'd be going, ooh. I mean, I would, and it would kind of haunt me. I think it's terrific you can do that. It's a gift.
Yeah, I suppose it's a gift. Can it be a curse as well? I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit
but you're
emotionally.
But presumably you're empathetic.
Yeah, I like to think so. Yeah, I like to think that.
Yeah, because I mean,
No, I think you've got the perfect balance, because you do come across as very empathetic.
Yeah.
But you do have that detachment as well. That's quite a balance. That's quite a balance to strike. You don't come across as cold.
If you weren't
or aloof
empathetic,
in
you'd
any
be
way.
like the world's worst person for the job. What do you think? Do you think he's raving mad? Well, I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. What's that the time? Lunch. And I mean, that wouldn't really be the way. That really wouldn't be the way forward. This is interesting. Oh, this is a band coming in from Manhattan. This must be a good persona for interviewing, assessing prisoners. You are trustworthy.
Well, you know what? There is definitely something in that. I don't know if trustworthy is the right word, but you have to do what I do well. I think you have to be good at putting the person across you at ease quickly, because you've only got a very limited amount of time.
Yeah.
You might have an assessment that lasts an hour, and that's the longest you've got. And then, as I said before, getting into the prison is an absolute ball ache, so that might take longer than it should do.
Yeah.
So you're the type. The clock's ticking. You've got to try and extract as much as you can. So I think over time, I've learned to be a bit of a chameleon, to kind of,
You've never made
you can't
me
get
laugh.
too pally. You can't get too pally. I'm not saying getting pally, but you have to, if let's put it this way, if you're formal and stuffy, as I think some of my colleagues are, then you're not going to get a lot out of the client in front of you in a short period of time. You have to kind of relax, but not try too hard. And I think it is a bit of an art form.
I got one last question, because I can see in our magnificent digital green room our next guest chomping at the bit.
She is there.
Answer me this, and I have a very close friend who did this. What is the deal with women becoming pen pals and then infatuated with murderers or mass murderers and then wanting to marry them?
Yeah.
What the hell, in a nutshell, is that about?
I've got to be honest, I'm not sure I really understand that. I've been asked that before, and I've thought about it before. I mean, I tell you what I think the answer is, although I don't think I fully understand it. I think that it's probably about sort of power and dominance. I think we have this archetypal idea of men being like Neanderthal beasts that go out and kill animals and bring them back. So I think there's some women, and we have to stress that it's only a very, very small proportion of the population who kind of find a sense of admiration of that sense of power, and what is more kind of alpha male or powerful than a serial killer. I mean, it's pretty twisted, and I don't really understand that way of thinking.
I don't get it at all.
I can't think of any other way, of any other reason that you'd go for that kind of persona rather than, a good man. That's my best explanation.
Very close friend of mine, and I'm not going to say who, but you know who this person is, Neil Long. Don't say the name. Married someone who had been in prison for 27 years for murdering their mother. Started to pen pal, ended up marrying this person. Boy, did it end up bad.
And I know this person, do I?
Tell you later. When the mask dropped, what was behind? This is why I was asking about faking it. When that mask dropped, and eventually, after years, she saw who she truly married, you didn't want to be there. Trust me.
Wow.
You didn't.
And can I
Anyway,
ask you, Russ, just really quickly, what do you think the reason was that she went for this
I've
particular?
absolutely no idea. Because
I've got a theory. If I can just love him enough, I'll change him.
No,
Yeah.
no. This person admired. The person was found. It was apparently a miscarriage of justice. Frankly, not so sure. But they did a miscarriage of justice. He was paid millions by the state, millions and millions by the state. Fair enough. And I think my friend admired this person. And I met him several times. And I have to say, when I met him, and here's the scary bit, utterly charming, humble, delightful. When that mask dropped, wow. Dr. Soham Das, with 800,000 initials after your name, always a pleasure. Thank you
Really good to
so
have you back
much.
on, Doctor.
It's great.
Thank
I
you.
hope you'll come back, because people are, I got to tell you, the figures for this section of the show has been fantastic. People are finding it fascinating, and you give such an interesting but such a down-to-earth interpretation of really complicated issues.
Yeah.
Bless you for that.
Really
That's
good to have you on.
really kind of you, Russ and Neil. Thank you so much for having me on. I'd love to
always.
come
Thank you,
back.
Doc.
And
Take
you'll
care.
be back. Don't you worry. You will be back. Take care. Bye-bye.
So before I introduce our next guest,
Yes, fella.
I would like to do a little bit of a preamble.
I'm loving
'cause I
you.
thought,
Go
how,
ahead.
How can I introduce this guest? Now, I've
I
got to
don't
know
know.
this lady,
I don't
and
know.
she's so cool. I love her to bits, and so will you. But we're going to actually talk about money today. And this is a really big one, considering really money is just a medium of exchange that us human beings, use to exchange with each other. I think we really overcomplicate it big time. I read a book a while ago. You may, what?
We overcomplicate. It's a freaking nightmare.
Then you're going to enjoy this next guest. I read a
Right.
book a while ago called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace G. Wattles. You heard of that? It's a bit of a
No.
personal development
You
classic.
just made that name up. I don't believe
No,
it.
I did not. He's
I
a
don't
funny
believe
looking
a-
little
don't
man,
believe
and
a
he
word
lived
of
in the 19th century.
Okay.
The premise being, and this is the important bit, that if we believe and feel a certain way, think, feel, believe a certain way, money or abundance would be the result. In other words, it puts us at cause, not at the effect. It's a
That's where
mindset
I've
of
gone
being at
horribly,
cause of
horribly
you.
wrong. Is this your whole thing about putting things into the universe and it comes back to you and all that? Which I
not really.
believe, by the way. I
Not
believe.
really. Maybe you can put it that way if you want. You can look at it from that point of view or a scientific point of view. It doesn't matter. This is more scientific. But anyway, ultimately, either way, whichever way you look at it, it's putting us at cause in the matter rather than being a victim or at effect of it. I also read ages ago, because of the meaning we attach to money, there's a lot of contradiction about it. Indeed, it was easier, I read in someone's book once, to get people to discuss the most intimate details of their sex lives than their financial lives.
Do you know what?
Plus,
Can I leap it? Can
What?
I leap in? Now, when I went and emigrated to America and worked in America, in England, where I'd been working obviously up to that point, you never discuss salary. I'd never say, Neil, how much are you making at Jackie? Radio Jackie. Well, Neil, what were they paying you? You'd never do that. And in fact, it would be Mr. Long and Mr. Kane back then. I went to America, and first of all, hey, Russ, how are you? I'm thinking, what's this hey, Russ business? It's always been, Mr. Kane, Mr. Jones, hello, Mr. Gerard, or whatever it might be. And then they just would talk about money. Boom. So different. Straight, like they'd known you for 30 seconds. How much are you making there? What do you pay for that? How much is that car?
Yeah,
What's
I
your
know.
rent?
Very different.
Blimey.
So there's also a lot of blame flying around about money. Government, religion, we blame them, blame immigrants, blame anyone you want, you name it. Yeah, if it wasn't for them, we'd all be richer, blah, blah, blah. But what if it wasn't a blame game? What if it wasn't a blame game?
Shit, isn't it? It's just rubbish.
What if we could really empower ourselves on this important subject? And here to bring some sanity.
Oh, thank
and to
God,
chat
because I
about-
thought if you're going to say here she is a pastry cook, your introduction would have been pointless.
So the subject, and to chat about her new course,
Yeah.
it's Jo Happiness Howarth. Hello.
Hey, hello, how are you?
Really good. Good to
Older
see
but
you,
no
Jo.
wiser is my answer to you.
This Russ is one of
Another-
my favorite human beings in this quadrant of the universe. I love
Right.
this lady. She's so
Wow.
cool.
Okay, does she know that?
Well, tell us just a little bit about you first of all, Jo. Just to explain what the Happiness Club is and how people can
Yes.
get involved with that. Then we want to hear about making sense of our financial worlds.
Okay. He does tell me on a regular basis, Russ, that he thinks I'm cool. So
Wow.
that's fine by me. It's very fine by
He's
me.
never said
Every
that to
day,
me.
3 in the
He
morning,
never
I'll
said
text,
that.
"You're cool."
He never said that to me. Never.
So, yes, hello, I'm Jo Howarth, and I run a company called the Happiness Club. So I work with people to look after their mental health and emotional well-being. That's
Oh,
that's the core of my job. But
you
for
like
me,
you straight away. You're
well,
marvelous.
yeah, money, financial well-being is a huge part of mental well-being. I mean, just listening to the two of you chat before I came on, and Russ, your reactions to what Neil was saying shows, you're saying, oh, it's hard and it's complicated and
Did I speak like that?
see,
I thought I was saying, actually, I think you'll find it's hard and quite complicated.
no,
Yeah,
not
I think that's what
entirely.
I think that's what you heard. Okay, move on.
But we have these reactions to talking about money, to dealing with money, and it can have a massive effect on our mental health, which is why I'm bothered about it, really. So yeah, as Neil says, I am, for the month of November, I'm running a live money mindset course, teaching some of the stuff that I've learned over the years. I am not by any stretch of the imagination where I want to be financially yet, but I have done a lot of work on my money mindset. It's a bit of a trendy phrase that a lot of people use right now, but it boils down to the same premise as I work with people on stress and anxiety and depression and things like that. And it all boils down to the same, everything that we do, all of our behavior, everything that we say, it's all driven by the beliefs that we hold in our subconscious minds. And so we have beliefs around money and finances and what we're allowed and what we're not allowed and what we can have and what we can't have. And those beliefs drive our behavior then in terms
And
of...
because we're so in the goldfish bowl, if you like, we can't see outside of it. We can't see it's just that our beliefs, it's just our perception. We think that's the way the world is. We generalize it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the most
can
common...
I just leap? I've got to leap in here because I've got to tell you, I'm not buying all of this. And I'm always very honest on the show.
Go for it.
And, if you're broke or I don't quite understand how that's all linked to mental attitude. If things haven't worked out, if you have a series of things that go wrong and you find yourself in financial peril, etc., I'm not sure that's a mental thing. That's and it's not the cosmos, it's what's going on. It's happened. Okay.
And that's utterly where I used to live, totally. And I've been broke. I've been in that situation.
So what changed it for you?
For me, what changed it was working on my beliefs about myself, about the world, about money, about what I was allowed to have, what I deserved to have, what I was worthy of having. I don't want to give the impression that I'm blaming people if they're broke. That's not what this is about.
That's a really important nuance.
Right? That's not at all what this is. It's not about saying, it's your fault. It is about realizing that everything we do as human beings, every single thing that we do or say is driven by our subconscious beliefs about ourselves and about the world.
And if we're brought up in an environment where we're constantly told, wait a minute, let me just reach for this one, money doesn't grow on trees. And actually, before it became plastic, it kind of did, if you think about it. But anyway, if you think about it, money is the root of all evil. That's another good one. We're not the kind of people that have ever had money. You have to work really hard and put your nose against the grindstone to get a modicum of success. And I think this might semi-answer your question, Russ, because there are people that hold those beliefs. And it seems that some people...
Hang on, the last one's perfectly true. If you're going to sit on your ass and expect everything to plop in your lap, you're an idiot. Of course you've got to get going.
But there are some people that work really, 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 really hard and are still poor. There are some people, perhaps they're working smarter, or perhaps they have a different mindset.
Don't work harder, work smarter is always the way.
It could be that, or it could be they've got a different mindset. If that was entirely to 100% true all the time, that hard work equals success, there weren't all people that work hard successful in that way.
Because I don't know what job they do I? If you're a hedge fund
manager, there's got to be more to the equation.
You're a hedge fund manager and you're on a salary of several million a year and your Christmas bonus. I sat down for lunch one day near Christmas and the guy was beaming. I said, well, you're looking to go, yeah, I just got my Christmas bonus. It was 8 million. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. What do? They push pieces of paper around. They don't actually do anything, really. I mean, that's the nature of it. they're playing with your money. So yeah, that's working smarter, I suppose. But if you're working in a, I don't know, tin mine or a coal mine, that you're working bloody hard and it's dangerous, and then something happens in your life, you got hospital fee, that's not your fault.
No one's. This is a really difficult one because people, when it comes to a notion of, I guess, taking complete responsibility for your situation in life, it's very easy to blame yourself, and it's a really subtle nuance. But that doesn't help, does it, Joe? That doesn't help. That's not the
No.
point of it.
For
Tell
me,
us more.
this is one of the things that I talk about in my work a lot. There's a massive difference between responsibility and blame. And we get the two mixed up. We think if somebody's telling us to take responsibility for our lives, for ourselves, because ultimately we are only responsible for ourselves, and we are the only people that can be responsible for ourselves. And we are the only people that we're responsible for. But we have this thing as human beings that when someone says, you know, time to take responsibility, we interpret that as being blamed for where we are and what we're experiencing.
I did.
The two are completely different. Blame is utterly disempowering. When you blame someone or something else for whatever's happening in your life, what you're doing is handing the power over your life to that thing, to that person.
Very true.
Taking responsibility is the most liberating and empowering thing you
If
can
you've got, let's just say you're in a business relationship. I just want to dig a little deeper here.
Yeah.
And I've been there several times. And you have, and I'm not talking about now. I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about the past.
Okay.
And you've got business partners that you've trusted, and you realize they are not only incompetent, they're possibly dishonest or bonkers, or all three. And it's put you in dans le merde. Is that because you trusted them, or you had the business relationship with them in the first place when it all seemed they presented as fine?
Difficult one, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but for me, that absolutely comes down to your subconscious beliefs about yourself, about the world, about other people, which is what drives all of your behavior. So you said before, when your last guest was on, you asked him the question about women that fall in love with
Convicted serial killers, yeah.
Well, for me, again, that's driven by subconscious beliefs. Those women have a belief or have a set of beliefs that attract them to those people. And in order to stop that attraction, you change the beliefs. Same thing with the business idea, right? You have a set of beliefs that have attracted you to those characteristics in those people subconsciously.
And these beliefs come from where? The beliefs come from society, media, religion, other people?
The beliefs largely come from when you're a child and everything that you're faced with when you're a kid. So a lot of the beliefs that we hold as human beings are the same beliefs as our parents, grandparents, whoever was in charge of us when we were teachers, the things we hear on social media these days, television, everywhere and anywhere. You can pick these beliefs up. Most of the beliefs that you hold in your subconscious mind are in there by the time you're 6 or 7 years old.
Wow.
And they stay with you through your life unless you actively change them, which is what I work with.
What would happen to make someone actively change them? Because if it's just the way you see the world, that's the way the world is, and it can't change in that point of view. So how do you actually realize there's something that can be changed? And then how do you go about doing it?
Oh, so many different ways. For me, it was a massive trauma. I got to 25 thinking this is how I am as a person. This is it. This is what life is, blah, blah. And then bless him, my dad passed away very suddenly of a heart attack when I was 25 and he was 50. Oh, dear. And it sent me into a complete downward spiral.
Tailspin, huh?
Yeah, total. And I ended up in therapy. And it wasn't until I was in therapy that I realized that it was possible to think a different way. It was possible to see life a different way because there was a person sat in front of me who had helped hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people change the way they thought about themselves, which is why I now do the work I do. So, yeah, and we absolutely used to believe, there was a comment that came up saying it's hardwired. We absolutely used to believe that we were hardwired, that once those beliefs were in place, that was it. Tough bananas. This is you for life.
neuroplasticity and all that.
Actually, now we know that's not the case, thankfully, and that is perfectly possible to change the beliefs, to release them, to dampen them down, to lessen them. Yeah, absolutely. Firmly believe that.
I'll just read that out because that's important for the benefit of those listening on Deluxe. Asa Don Brown, who is a consultant psychiatrist, super high up in the psychiatric community. I firmly believe that our beliefs can be changed with personal desire and internal work. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
It's completely possible, and I'm living proof of that.
Didn't Wayne Dyer, the great metaphysical writer, say when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change?
Yes, absolutely. And that's
Say
it.
that
right?
again slowly.
When you change the way you look
important.
at things,
When you change
what
the
you
way you
look
look
at
at things, yeah.
changes.
When you change the way you look
No,
at
I'm
things, you change the
cogitating,
things
which
you
isn't
He's
look
good radio.
cogitating.
It isn't good radio. Carry on. I'm thinking. About it.
To illustrate that point, there's a very good, I don't know if you call it a sketch, and it's a picture of a young man running towards an old lady, and a handbag comes into view, and he's running towards her. He gets closer and closer to the handbag, and everyone, of course, thinks that he's about to mug her. At the last minute, he pushes her out the way, and then you see the thing that was falling from the building side, which was about to crush her. Complete 180 perceptual shift.
Yeah.
Right.
And for me, everything in life is perception, right? Everything. There's a really famous image of two people standing either side of a giant number on the floor, and it's either a number 6 or a number 9, depending on where they're standing, right? So the person on this side can see a number 6, the person on this side can see a number 9. They're both
Both are
looking at the
convinced they're
exact same
absolutely
thing.
right.
Well, they
and
are
that's how
both
war
right.
starts.
But they are both right.
Well, they
It's a
are.
6 and a
Yes.
9. So they're
Right.
both right. So
That's
how
it.
does that- How does that
Or
help?
both wrong, depending on which way you look at it.
Well, it's not a 7, though, is it? It is a 6 or a 9. Be literal about it.
Joe Howarth, one of the coolest human beings in this quadrant of the universe. Tell us about this, a little bit more about this course and where people can access it, because this stuff absolutely intrigues me, and I really do believe it. I do believe in this. I think after I've cogitated it for many years, and I've this whole belief system thing, and I find it no coincidence that belief system as acronym will be BS a lot of the time. In other words, we all believe things that don't serve us.
Very
So we
good.
need some good belief systems, some good BS. If you
Absolutely. And we
Good
go
thing.
through our lives. We go through our lives repeating these belief patterns over and
Yeah.
over and over again that form our behavior patterns and our thought patterns over and over and over again. And largely we're completely unaware that it's happening. We're largely living on autopilot, on automatic, because that's what your subconscious mind does. It learns all this stuff and then it repeats it automatically for you. So you don't have to consciously think about it all the time, right?
Which we need. I mean, it's a part of the mind that we need. I mean, if we didn't have it, we'd have to relearn how to open a door every time we went up to one. It would be
That's
pretty
it.
inconvenient. But when things overgeneralize and they don't serve us anymore, that's the time to do this kind of work. So where can people find this? And tell us how people can join us.
So you can find more about my work generally on the website, thehappinessclub.co.uk. This course is being run exclusively on Facebook. So if you want to find it on Facebook, the Happiness Club page on Facebook is where you'll find details about it. And how to sign up. We literally started, the first live session was this morning, so you've still got time to catch up.
Ooh.
But it all hinges around changing those beliefs, releasing the ones that aren't helping you, that aren't serving you, and embracing the ones that are. And like I say, we've picked up most of those ones automatically without being aware of it, and we just repeat them over and over and over again.
Which is the definition of madness, isn't it? As Einstein said.
Absolutely, right.
Doing the same thing repeatedly and hoping to get a different result.
That's
That
it.
is the
which is
definition
what
of
most of us do.
And I want to really drill down on this nuance here, because it's not about blaming yourself.
No.
Taking responsibility is not about blaming yourself. Responsibility, I suppose, is about choosing your words and actions and deliberate empowerment, while blame is quite the opposite, giving your power away to someone else, right? And it's not about guilt or shame, it's about awareness. It's just being able to look at it in a very dispassionate way and go, oh, that's not working, something else might work better, let's try something else. It's not about, oh, that's not working and that means something bad about me.
No, we've picked up most of these beliefs about whatever it is, money, whatever it is, when we were Diddy, right? When we were tiny, and we just walk through our lives with them because we're not even really aware that they're there, unless something specific happens to bring them straight into our attention.
I mean, this could be a fantastically exciting journey, couldn't it?
Hugely, I think. Well, I mean, I've been doing this work for more than 10 years, and it fascinates
Journey of a
me still
lifetime.
every single day, right? Because
I love your work. Your work is so you're just a lovely bright star in the world. I love. I'm going to big yourself up because you're probably too humble to do it. You do the Daily
No, shut
Glad.
up. She's going to rub that magic ring and turn it. Something. I'm just waiting for this. It's going to be a big magic trick.
The Daily Glads, and I love that. And I really
What's that? What's the Daily Glad?
Daily Glads. It's a bit like a gratitude list, but I'm glad about this, and it can be the most simple things. I'm glad.
I like that.
I'm glad we're talking about this subject.
Yeah, I'm loving
I'm glad I'm working with one of my old Capital buddies. I'm glad I've got a great producer,
When's he turning
Mr.
up?
Lee, in the room. I'm glad I'm a super good-looking, cool dude.
Yeah, I'm glad you're
That's meant to be
delusional.
funny. Shut it. Sorry about that. Just abusing my producer. But it's really just focusing. Again, it's focusing on what you're grateful for and what you have, rather than focusing
That's
on
how I
what
got
most
through
people do, which
lockdown.
is
You
what
know,
you lack,
people often
right?
say that, and little tiny things, and that's
Yeah.
fine. I'm happy with
That's it.
That's it. I'm not looking for.
But little tiny
Huge,
things create
huge
momentum,
stuff.
and then they become one big snowball, don't they? It's all about
And that's
momentum.
it, right?
Well, they can or not, but I mean, it's to be happy with what you've got, but want to improve it to a level that you're content.
I think
And
I
I
think I
think
read
the
somewhere
one
the optimal mindset is to be content and happy now and eager for more.
Yeah.
Happy and hungry.
Yes,
Because if
exactly.
you're unhappy with
Eager
this
for
much,
more
you're going to be
what?
unhappy with
Hang
that
on,
much.
Eager for more what?
For
Anything.
more whatever, for more
Okay,
everything,
okay.
for more growth.
Whatever you
That's
want.
me.
I mean,
I always think, oh, I wonder what's around the next bend. See, that's me.
Nice.
That's what
Yes.
motivates me. Oh, if I do that, I wonder if I can go. You know, and that's
yeah, but what if you could steer the car in the direction you wanted and didn't have to be taken by the bend?
I got a Tesla. It does it itself. I don't need to. Try and get with the program.
Ants
man.
on fire.
Try and get with the program, will you? It's
So
really-
search the Happiness Club on Facebook, Joe, yeah?
Yes,
Now,
absolutely.
And it's not
listen,
too late to sign up, no?
No,
Joe
no.
Howarth,
Yes.
who's obviously Neil's pin-up, I'd love you to come back because there are so many things here that I want to unpack.
Okay.
I'm not sure we've sorted out the money side of it, and I think that's really freaking key. So I'd like to really delve down. So I'm going to leave it to my erstwhile colleague to sort it out with you, because I want to discuss that. I wanted to look at, again, the idea of allowing yourself to be happy. I think so many people don't. And the other thing is, somebody said to me on Facebook the other day, and this sums it up about being happy. You're very puerile. And I went, yeah, of course I am, because that's what keeps me going. I think if you lose your childish sense of, I mean, you're paid like an idiot. If you lose that childish sense of fun, that I didn't even know you were wearing that. Yeah, precisely. Precisely. What do I do? I got on. That's what I do. It says I play drums and I know things. That's the rest of it. If you lose that, you become a boring old fart, and you stagnate.
And
That's
also,
just me. That's what I.
childlikeness has got another nuance to it as well. Not just the humour, but children see things fresh in the moment every time. We've all got these beliefs and perceptions, which Joe's been, talking about brilliantly for the last 20 minutes. But if you were to literally wash that lens of perception clear, and imagine if you came to the world for the first time today and you had no past and you just looked around you, I mean, it'd be quite impressive to see it all new for the first time, wouldn't it?
And to be able to do that, to root yourself in that kind of attitude and to do what you said, Russ, which is, I wonder what's around the next corner.
Yeah.
To have that attitude of playful.
Yeah, and it depends how you say it. It can either be, I wonder what's around the next corner, or, I wonder what's around the next corner.
That's it, right?
Which way? Yeah.
This
So,
is
Joe,
coming
looks
in
like
from
you're
Liz.
gonna be coming
This is
back on the
coming in from
regular. I
Liz
hope
Saul.
that's
Sorry,
okay.
hang on. This is coming in from Liz, and it's a little bit cryptic, Joe Howarth. A little bit cryptic. Neil, you know you did your best. Not today. And more responsible than you think.
But enough about my love life. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah. Well, that would have been a very... Never mind. Okay. So, Joey, will you come back? Could
Definitely.
you bear it?
Yes, of course.
because you've got so much. There's so much I really want to unpick, and I think
Yeah,
that
me
would be
too. We'd love
really
to have you.
interesting.
We'd love to have you
And
back
if
regularly.
Neil thinks you're fabulous, then
I do. I absolutely love you. I think you're absolutely awesome. And my radio wife, Nikki Patrick, loves you as well. We all love Joe Howarth.
Thank you.
There we are. Well, you seem extremely charming, and I want to have more time to dig deep because there's so much here to do. Bless you for that. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We are right bang out of time.
On Wednesday, by the way, how to combat anxiety
Okay. Oh, sorry. That was a bit
with
of
my
acting there. Just-
friend Kate Hudson Hall.
Blimey. Suddenly
you,
he's got friends. Bye, everybody. Stay safe. Thanks, Joe.